This is Father Andrew Ritchie, and you're listening to Catholic Inspiration, a podcast from my website at studyprayserve.com. These homilies, presentations, and retreats form part of my ministry as a Catholic priest for the Diocese of Superior. And now I invite you to open your hearts to some Catholic inspiration. Last winter, when I was coming back from my parents in Arizona, I took a flight from Tucson to Minneapolis. Sitting next to me, really interesting fella. He was coming back to Minneapolis, and you start chit-chatting on an airplane. He said, "What were you doing?" Because he'd asked about my vacation. And I said, "Well, I was, cooking with my parents." And I asked, "What were you doing?" He said, "I was hiking in the mountains." He said, "This is a treat. I take once a year for 1 week. I try to get out and I get into these great parks and hike these mountain paths to some beautiful summits." I said, "Well, okay, tell me more." He said, "The views are amazing. It's spectacular. You're hiking on these trails, and when you finally get to the summit and you look out, and it is breathtaking. It's exquisite. It's beautiful. Nature and the magnitude and the power are absolutely spectacular." He said, "But I've learned a lot doing these hiking trails in the mountains. You got to be focused, because sometimes these paths are going in different directions, and you got to stay on your map and make sure you are focused clearly on exactly the path you need to take. If I want to get to that summit, I need to go on this path, and you got to stay on the path. There's a lot of branches." And then he said, "The other thing is I'm in the best shape of my life, Father, because this hiking is hard. The altitude in Minneapolis is a little different than when you're up in the mountains. And so the hiking and the training and the walking and all the upper body work, he uses those walking poles just to keep his balance." He says, "I'm in great shape because it's hard work, and I like the challenge of the hard work." He said, "But I also learned that you got to be prepared. You roll an ankle at 7,000 feet, you got to come down 7,000 feet. And every now and then you turn around a path and there's an animal looking at you, and it ain't particularly friendly. Of course, there's snakes. We try to avoid them. So I've had to learn a little bit about medicine, a little bit about safety, a little practicality about what do you do when you got to share the path with a critter." But he said, I love it. I'll do all of that. I'll keep focused on the path. I'll do the hard work. And I'll certainly come prepared so I can get that view. It's worth it. And I thought a lot about what he had to say in light of this gospel reading we just heard from Luke chapter 14. Jesus is on the way to Jerusalem. He's going to die in Jerusalem. He's going to rise in Jerusalem. And while he's journeying on the way to where he will do his saving work for our salvation, he's talking to people about what it means if you're going to follow me. Because to follow Jesus, he says it up front, I got to come first. You're going to put me before your family, before your friends, before your job, before your life. To follow Jesus, he makes it clear, means I am number one and at the center of your life. He says it. And then he says this outrageous thing, you want to be my disciple? Carry your cross. It's going to be hard. There's no spin in that. He ain't pretending anything. You want to follow me? Saddle up. It's going to be intense. It's going to be a challenge. You're going to get stretched. There will be hard work. And finally, he does these two parables at the end. One about building a tower, one about waging war. You better come prepared, because you don't start a building project if you don't have the funds, and you don't go to battle unless you got the army to back you up. And as Jesus is speaking about being first in our lives, about embracing hardship in our lives, and about coming prepared, climbing the mountain is a lot like going through the spiritual battle that gets us to heaven. Because friends, when someone says, Jesus is laying it out pretty tough. He's got to be the center. It's going to be hard, and you're going to come prepared. Why? Because heaven is worth it. That the view from heaven, the final destination, where we are pilgrims passing through this life on a journey. This is not our home. But the Lord makes it clear that if we're going to walk the journey through this life to get there, we have to embrace this with our eyes open. And that's a practical moment for all of us then to reflect. Is Christ at the center of our lives? Some days maybe we get it right. Some days maybe we drift off. But do we then keep saying, Lord, I want to come back to you. Lord, I want to put you at the center of everything I say and do. And on those moments when it gets hard, and I mean hard, I mean when there's no gas in the tank, I mean when we don't know where to turn, I mean when we're exhausted, and it drives us to our knees and we say, help please, because I can't do it by myself. And then that notion of preparation. We can't take our faith for granted. But what are we doing to put the tools on the belt so that we can embrace this life that we have, live this life with the gifts of faith that God has given? Whether you want to talk about the scriptures, the sacraments, whether you want to talk about fellowship, whether you want to talk about daily prayer. There are so many amazing tools that we can use to be prepared to face the spiritual battle that we encounter on the way as we make our ascent through this life to the life to come. I've had some beautiful moments in my own hiking to get to mountaintops. The view is stunning. And to be able to look back and see, wow, we were way down there. And we made it all the way back. It says, you know what? The journey, it was worth it. God has so much more in store for us that is beautiful and precious and good. Friends, the invitation then today is He's inviting us to come along. But He wants to be first in our lives. He wants us to embrace what is hard. He wants us to be prepared. For the journey will stretch us, challenge us, that we might grow in full stature as sons and daughters of God, to be with God forever in heaven. God bless you all. This is Father Andrew, and I hope this podcast inspires your faith. Now, if you found it helpful, please share it with a friend. And you can help me by leaving a rating and a review. I keep all my listeners in my daily prayers, and I ask for your prayers in return. God bless you, my friends.